Good morning, Shalom Aleichem. Wonderful, beautiful chevra online as well. Chasdei Hashem in person. Ladies and gentlemen, Chasdei Hashem. We have this opportunity, this glorious opportunity to do what we're doing. I just mentioned a few moments ago to one of the Bnei Chabura that there's one of the certain Tzadikim Talmidei Chachamim, Rav Leuchte, he gave a shir. Someone spoke to me about it yesterday, this Nakuda of Musa, a part of the Nakuda of Musa that's sometimes missed is the critical thinking. Working on our middot is critically thinking, asking questions, using our mind, getting the juices of the brain going. And this is something which is very important that sometimes easily can be missed. You're just working on your middot. And critical thinking is put within learning Gemara Be'in, but that's not true. That's not true. We've got this wonderful tool the Borei Olam has given us, this brain, and we could think, and we should know how to critically think, asking the right questions in the right time, in the right spaces, very, very powerful. So Baruch Hashem, I feel that here we can go into a subject matter using our minds and pushing a little bit, each time a little bit further, coming from different angles. And that's something very important. Hopefully we'll discuss a little bit about this Nakuda today. I just want to start off by praising and thanking Hakaras Hatov to the Tzaddik who sponsored this whole series. So he should have bracha, mazel and hatzlacha. He wishes to remain anonymous. And as well to the Choshev Yid who sponsored these recording the microphones. He should as well have bracha, mazel and hatzlacha. And just spend a moment, who and where do you wish to share bracha, mazel and hatzlacha? Friends, family, community, and to think about Am Yisrael, to think about our glorious nation, and to think about humanity, just for a moment, wishing people well. Bracha, mazel and hatzlacha. And to remember, Chevra, that we can take the opportunity to makabel upon ourselves all malchus shamayim. We can take the opportunity to makabel upon ourselves v'ahavta l'recha kamoicha, and as well to invite the Shechina to our space here. Torah from the Chelkas Yeshua. So I just want to take a moment to remind ourselves there is change and there is transitioning. So wherever we have come from right now, we've come to this space. And we are here now, and just to take a moment to ground ourselves, to be present, and just to listen and to look around, just to be present for a moment, to ground ourselves. Das tachtoin chitzoni. And das tachtoin pnimi habata lahabit, just to observe, I'm in my body right now. I feel feelings, I observe, I think thoughts, just to be aware of your internal world for a moment. And you can start to do that by asking the question, Ma ani margish, what am I feeling in my body right now? And you can ask yourself simply, non-judgmental observation, what feelings am I feeling right now? And you can even ask the question, Ma ani choshev, what am I thinking right now? And as we go further into this science, what we will come to understand is that hirhurim, our thinking, and thinking in general, shows itself, manifests itself as sounds, the inner voices we hear within our mind, and imagery, we see images. So to be aware of that, and hopefully just from doing a simple exercise, it should change our state, even a little bit. Just to develop an awareness is a great gift, mamash a great gift. So Chevra, where are we up to? So we're in this passage right now. We're in this passage, page 18. The intellect can't grasp godliness, cannot grasp godliness. I wanted to start before we go further into this, we'll recap what we spoke about. We'll read through it quickly, Be'ezras Hashem. But I wanted to start with something which I think is an important endeavor, and it's mamash very, very, very general. It's very, very general. And what I would like to just share are some of the nukudas of what the chidush is of Pnimis HaTorah, as in the world of Kabbalah. And as I said, we're just touching mamash Rosh Tevas. However, with this Hagdama that I wish to share, it will hopefully give us a better shape for this chapter that we are going into. So first of all, kapshutai, Kabbalah as in the word itself, to receive. Kabbalah means to receive. As we know, every word in Lashon HaKodesh, etymologically, there's so many dimensions to one particular word. So when speaking about the word Kabbalah itself, it means to receive. When we're speaking about this nakuda of Kabbalah, receiving, we're speaking about a nakuda of Tikkun HaMidos. Something that we've brought up again and again, that if you go in the derech of the Gra, which his Ikar Limud was Kabbalah, and by the Ramchal as well, the Ramchal writes in several places that Ikar Limud should be Elokus. The nakuda that comes with that shouldn't surprise us. For example, in the beginning of Evan Shlema, if a person doesn't work on their middot, lama lo chaim, why are they alive? Which is, again, this very, very important nakuda that we work a certain way. We work a certain way. And this nakuda of working a certain way, understanding the mechanism of how we work, is very, very connected to what we are labeling Tikkun HaMidos. The more we understand the architecture of the soul, the more we understand the experiential differences between neshama, ruach, and nefesh. Understanding that the nefesh can be, as we say, the amigo, that the ego can be our amigo, or the ego ain't our amigo.
What's an amigo?
The ego.
What's an amigo?
Amigo is a friend.
Amigo's friend.
Sorry, it wasn't Egyptian. It wasn't in Mechila. So this nakuda of the ego, is the ego working with us? Or is the ego working against us? Another articulation is the nefesh working with us. Is the nefesh chas v'shalom working against us? And what we want to understand is there's a programmability that is available to us, that we want to work on our middot. So the nakuda of Kabbalah from one side is receiving something. In order to receive something, there needs to be a vessel to receive. So there needs to be tikkun hamidos, which is becoming the kli, it's becoming the merkava. So this is a very important nakuda, because if a person doesn't understand Chochmas HaKabbalah from the perspective of the architecture of the soul, the different soul parts, how the different parts of the souls are experienced, we very much can miss out on this nakuda. So it's one nakuda to think about, one point to think about. There's another point as well when speaking about the world of Sod. The world of Sod is very, very interesting. So when we speak about the Chidush of Kabbalah, Kabbalah is trying to share a communication between the infinite and the finite. When we're speaking about the wholesomeness of the infinite and the brokenness and the fracture of the finite, how's that bridging taking place? So another articulation of what Kabbalah is a communication between these two worlds, and how to bridge these two worlds. How do we bridge the infinite and how do we bridge the finite? So one of the chidushim of the Arizal is the Arizal endeavored to create a text which is, so to speak, the words on the pages are always going to be nista. But what that text is working on doing, it's creating a system, it's creating a communication and several layers of communication that are, as odd as it may sound, but those who learn Kabbalah know exactly what we're speaking about here. This odd reality where there are just layers and layers and layers and parallels and parallels and parallels of different ways that Ein Sof manifests in Olam Hazeh. So you have all of these systems, within systems, all of, so to speak, the pipes that are given over to us to help us communicate this bridging of the infinite to the finite. But you know within itself that we're never going to understand, but we have to try and understand. So there's this reality where the world of Kabbalah is trying to bridge the finite to the infinite. Now, what we want to share with that in context, there are certain schools of thought where they don't speak this language, so either it's all about the infinite or it's all about the finite. And this is the major challenge that we face. So when a person learns Kabbalah and they understand that it is a rational system that is trying to communicate a bridging from the infinite to the finite, and it's inclusive of the infinite and finite, not exclusive. It's not hyper-focusing just on the infinite, and it's not hyper-focusing just on the finite. We have here a system that's very fascinating. It lends ourselves to a communication that, yes, at times it could be abstract, but the whole wanting is to find that abstractness all the way down to the very simple practice of eating and sleeping, anything that is physical, to find its way down, that we can constantly be bridging the infinite and the finite. So this middle ground is always a gray area. This middle ground is always a little bit tricky, but this lends to the next understanding of Kabbalah. Kabbalah comes from the root of makpil, which is parallel. Parallel. So this nakuda of relationship, this nakuda of context, you hear us in our Beis HaMedrash speak about this time and time again. What is the context? What is the context? What is the context? And makpil is parallel. Parallel. How does one thing parallel in context to what we are speaking about here? So the conversation of Kabbalah, Pnimius HaTorah, allows us to shift into a maturity that gives us the availability to recognize linkage, because as we know, the way we make meaning is through selection and association. So Kabbalah allows for the human experience to be met through a body of texts that speaks in the language of human experience. Selection and association, context. There's always context. You can't run away from context. So much so you can have two people who experience exactly the same thing and they will see it differently. You can have twins who grew up exactly the same way and they will still experience things differently, even if you can metrically show that they've been brought up the same way, in the same environment, having the same experiences. They will see things, perceive things differently, because there's perspective. So this is the next shift in Kabbalah. Kabbalah is about perspective. So there are limitations within the human experience zooming into the mind. That the mind can't grasp everything. So now, when the mind can't grasp everything, what do? Do you give up? Or maybe, as we'll read hopefully today, there's a recognition that you have other tools. You have other ways of grasping, which are beyond the intellect, which may sound, oh, that's not rational, that's not logical. Where actually, when one zooms out and understands how the human being works, what we've been told is logical and rational, truly humanistically is not logical and rational. Because, we don't function this way. I'll give you one example. When two people are arguing about something, they're arguing typically, especially if it's politics, they're arguing about beliefs. When a person's speaking to the other person, not to the person, but to the beliefs, typically what starts to happen if they don't have tikkun hamidos, what happens is that each party is just pushed into their corner even more strongly. If you include tikkun hamidos, already there could be a conversation. So what we are speaking about here is that in order to fully grasp something, when the availability to get completely and utterly lost in yourself is readily there, we bring in a dimension of tikkun hamidos. It will change the way you are relating and perceiving. So what we can say is that wholesomeness doesn't just come through the intellect. There's more to the human being, and really in grasping information which is to become wisdom, We mentioned Tikkun Hamidos, the fixing up of our virtues. We spoke about how the world of bridging the infinite and the finite. So you have to have the availability to pull back from your own experience. So that's included, the world of Kabbalah as a recognition that we are drawing out a different way of processing, or we're developing a different way of processing. And this is something which is incredibly important, that we really need today. Another nakuda of what Kabbalah is, it's a investigation that comes to a final conclusion, typically, that everything in our reality is what we call levushim, clothings. That the world of Sod, the world of Kabbalah, there's this central theme of Ein Sof, and how Ein Sof, how God's divine light shows itself, is revealed in this world. And that occurs through clothing upon clothing upon clothing. There's layers of clothing that we are relating to. We're never relating to reality, we're always relating to our interpretation of reality. And dependent, again, on our tikkun amidos, on our cleanliness of the lens, depending on our maturity of mind and having the ability to understand the bigger picture, having the ability to recognize there's different layers, things parallel one another, etc., then your ability to actually see more clearly is there for you. Yes?
If Levushim refers to the revelation of Hashem's light in this world, is there one word that refers to the lack of revelation of Hashem's light?
Klipa. Yeah, you have Levushim and you have Klipa. 100%.
Yeah.
Well, not din. Not stay away from the word. The word levush is recognizing from a healthy perspective. I'm always relating to clothing. I'm never relating to the etzem itself. And then with that, if a person from it's covered up in a negative way, this is based on the Reishis Chochma, I'm relating to klipa and levushim, and that's one nakuda that we have spoken about. That in our own experience, we don't ditch the levushim. We never suppress the levushim. We relate to the levushim in a healthy way. So for example, when we're speaking about the laws of Shabbat, the laws of Shabbos, the laws of Yom Tov, when we're speaking about laws of special occasions, when we speak about, the Kohanim in the Beis Hamikdash and the different avodas, the different works that the Kohanim are doing, constantly we're speaking about what? Levushim. We're speaking about levushim, how they change their clothes several times a day, how when we meet festivals and Shabbat, there's a distinction of the Chag to the non-Chag, the Shabbat to the Chol, and that's made by levushim, and we take it seriously. It's something that we take very, very, very seriously. So these are a few ideas when we're speaking about Kabbalah, Pnimis HaTorah, the importance of what it is coming from a healthy perspective. Again, we've got the nakuda of Tikkun Hamidos, we've got the nakuda of bridging the infinite and the finite, including the infinite and finite, not just hyper-focusing on one or the other. When we're speaking about the world of Kabbalah, we're speaking about context. Igulim and Yashar, background, foreground, parallels. And the very the very, very subtle positions, physiological position that I'm in, means that I'm going to see something a certain way and interpret it a certain way. And then you could have somebody else who's standing from here and they will see the way the sunlight hits that situation, the sounds that are going on, echoing in the space that you are in, the state of being that you are in. No people see the same thing the same way. Context. There's always context. There's always parallel. We mentioned how perception, we're speaking in the world of Kabbalah, we're speaking about perception, that we need a different set of tools. Rabbi Moshe Schatz once shared, I can't remember what it's called unfortunately right now, somebody may remind me, that the world is it 2D? And then Mr. Pencil comes along, and with Mr. Pencil, the sunlight hits it. So at first it's like a dot, and then the sunlight hits it, and you see the shadow. And you know what I'm talking about? There's a famous book that speaks to that Rabbi Moshe would use uses to explain this nakuda about perception. But you have 2D, 3D. You see things differently. Kipshutai. You see things differently. There's this other nakuda as well, as we said, when we're speaking about the world of Kabbalah, that there's subtleties of maturity. There's one more point as well that's important to understand, is cheshbonus. There's Hashem's cheshbon and there's our cheshbon. And this is Musa Heskel. It's very encouraging, if learnt correctly, to learn Kabbalah. Why? Because the word nista means hidden. But the word nista, which is based on Gemara Shabbos Lamed Aleph, means to break down. And there's an akuda of resilience. There's an akuda of resilience. When you understand that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has HaKadosh Baruch Hu's cheshbon, there's the Creator's cheshbon, and then there is my cheshbon. With a level of maturity of understanding the world of Kabbalah, the world of Sod, we understand, I can't understand HaKadosh Baruch Hu's cheshbon. All I have is my cheshbon. And I have to work with my cheshbon. I have to align, as it says in Pirkei Avos, I have to align my will with the divine will. And I have to try my best. So there's an Indian of resilience, because we speak a language of tikkun. We speak a language of healing, a language of beautification. So there's a famous story by Rabbi Usha Freund. Rabbi Usha Freund gave over these beautiful analogies, like Rabbi Nachman. And one of them is how there was a Yid who wanted to see a tzaddik nista. And he went round and hunted around to find a tzaddik nista, and he went from town to town. And people didn't know what this person was speaking about, the tzaddik nista, hidden tzaddik. So eventually, somehow, this person hears about a certain tzaddik nista, and he runs to see the tzaddik nista. And what happens while he's watching the tzaddik nista? The tzaddik nista is building a home. He's building a home, and then all of a sudden, as he's building the home, this man's watching for maybe a good few months. He's seeing this person build, and then the house is destroyed. And when the house is destroyed, something happens that the house is destroyed. This individual starts again building, house is destroyed. It goes on and on. The person observing the tzaddik nista, he becomes mamash, like he can't take it anymore. He's like, Rabbeinu Shalaylam. He feels so broken inside. And he sees this tzaddik, he's going and going, not breaking a sweat, going, not breaking a sweat. And he didn't seem so bothered, but this person observing the tzaddik nista is he's broken, and he has to pack up, leaves, and goes back home. So we have, the Gemara tells us in Gemara Shabbos, destruction for the sake of building. That when a person learns Kabbalah, the root, listar, it's the same word as nistar, hidden and destruction. That there's a nakuda of resilience. We don't know why things happen. When a person learns Sod, when a person learns Kabbalah, we never find out why things happen. But we have a deeper revelation that it's a big world. It's a very complex world. It's a very layered world. And you walk away with like, whoa. You walk away with like, wow. And there's a big nakuda here. There's a big nakuda of obedience. There's a big nakuda here of resilience, of gratitude. You become, when a person really starts learning Hakaras Hatov, you realize when a person starts learning Kabbalah, you realize I'm just a kli to Megala, I'm a Merkava. Everything is a Merkava. Everything is a Merkava bridging. Everything is about bridging. Everything is about bridging. I remember.
Breaking down. What's the sicer?
Yeah.
What are you breaking down?
Anything. In Gemara Shabbos. In
Kabbalah, breaking down your.
The word nista. Nista doesn't just mean. Correct.
So in Kabbalah,
that you understand there's a breakdown for revelation, but the point is the breakdown. There's a breakdown, and I don't get bent out of shape. I realize that's part of the journey, and that's a point of resilience. So if you learn really the world of Kabbalah, if you really learn what Nista is, you learn that there's never ever a revelation. The revelation is only a lavush, but you're okay with it.
I mean, when you see something seems bad in the world, that's almost in some way like a breakdown, because it's not a true gilui of.
It's not a matter of a true gilui. It's not a matter of a true gilui. On a certain respect, it is a true gilui. But again, it is a clear gilui. It's a clear revelation. Darkness is a clear revelation. That's part of the process. It's not like, oh, it's darkness now and that's hiding Hashem. No. The darkness is part of the Avodah. You're okay with that. You realize everything is a gilui. So even the destruction, even the heartache, even the pain is part of the revelation. It's not separate from the revelation. So this Sadik Nista, the house gets destroyed. Okay, there's a revelation. Okay, now there's a different form of revelation. So it builds a resilience. It builds a resilience, just to make it very, very clear. Kabbalah and these ideas build a resilience. Your level, going back to the beginning, your level of tikkun hamidos, your level of maturity will allow you to engage in the subject in a healthy way. And the beginning of the Eitz Chaim, the Hagdamah to the Eitz Chaim speaks about this. And we know, and we've said this before, in order to get into the Chaburas by Reb Chaim Vital, you had to achieve a level of what's called Hishtavus. Hishtavus is a state of das where it's all the same to me. Not that I'm disconnected, it's perspective. I can approach something with a healthy perspective. That I can come and I can meet something and it's not full of levushim or klipas. It's not full of my interpretation. I can pull out. In the language of the Baal Shem Tov, in Keser Shem Tov, Kaf Chet, Ois Beis, we speak about this nukud of Hachna and Havdalah. Hachna and Havdalah, I can pull back, and by definition, if I'm pulling back, I'm observing from a situation. So I'm not completely and utterly immersed. I'm not owned by it. I can pull back and I can observe. And from this state of separation, I can then distinguish and I can reintegrate in a healthy way, which is called hamtaka. So these are some of the ideas which I believe are important. Again, I'm just sharing them within however many minutes right now. Each one is a shiur within itself, with its set of marmakomus and the experiential side of it as well. So these are some of the ideas of why we learn Nista, and the reason why I wanted to bring this up is because this paragraph that we started last week, that we'll quickly read through again, that we're going into, is very much speaking to a point of human experience that's sometimes not mentioned. And it needs a conversation, especially today. That's why as well, based on what we've shared so far, that's why there's such a yearning for this thing called Pnimis HaTorah. Sometimes we term Pnimis HaTorah, subconsciously we get this, on a certain respect. Most people who learn Pnimis HaTorah end up perceiving life slightly differently or very differently, depending on the quality of their interaction with the material. Sometimes people just have bad middot and they can learn this material and they end up no good anyway. But when a person goes into it with an understanding that we're dealing with a body of wisdom teachings here that really can make a massive difference upon the way we are experiencing this world, that's something very profound. Even just this nakuda of recognizing that darkness, the uncomfortable, icky experiences that we experience is part of the revelation as well, that's very powerful. If we speak in the language of the Arizal, all the way down, Rabbi Nachman, Lukutei Halachas, when darkness is a gilui or, the Leshem brings this as well, darkness is a gilui or, darkness is a revelation of light that cannot be perceived in any other way apart from darkness. Such a powerful revelation of light that the vessel can't hold the light, so it comes out in a broken way. It's like that idea as well, when a person really contemplates this idea on a certain respect can give a person a lot of resilience. We're not taking away from the ickiness of the experience, but what we are doing is adding a dimension that the darkness is part of the revelation. And that, again, it gives you more patience, it can gift you more tolerance. Yes?
What does this have to do with learning Kabbalah over therapy?
Did I say to learn Kabbalah over therapy?
No, it sounds like that whatever someone can gain from learning Kabbalah properly, or let me the other way. Whatever someone can gain from therapy or healing can be gained from learning Kabbalah properly. In other words, tikkun middot.
So I would say that the nakuda of where we are in our generation and the conversation is a much bigger conversation. But what I would suggest is that if a person needs to go into therapy, they need to go into therapy. And as they go into therapy and they hopefully benefit from a healthy therapeutic model and a healthy person who is transmitting that therapeutic model, for sure the tikkun hamidos, for sure the perception, and it could lead them into a world of Kabbalah. Now, if somebody has a master teacher, if a person has a master teacher, then that's a different kettle of fish. But not many people do. Not many people do. So from a logical or rational perspective, it would make sense to go to a therapist or doctor, unless somebody has, like there's certain tzaddikim, the Ziduchover Rebbe, Zichron Livracha, somebody I used to have a relationship with, Zichron Livracha, the Boston Rebbe. So his grandfather was a Ziduchover Rebbe, and his mother's father, he was born in Ziduchover, if I remember correctly. And the Boston Rebbe, Zichron Livracha, he would say that his grandfather was like a doctor. He was incredibly well read, and he understood the medical side as well as the Kabbalistic side, and people felt safer going to the Ziduchover Rebbe than they did to a doctor, because he was more complete in his understanding and analysis. He spoke Latin. He used to write for what's it called? He used to write. A doctor writes a prescription. He used to write a prescription in Latin. He Piasetzner Rebbe as well used to write prescriptions. So there is this nakud of a wholesomeness within an approach. But typically today, if a person needs to go to a therapist, go to a therapist. One can't play games with these things. But again, it's a much longer conversation, not necessarily for here right now. But what we want to share is a more rationally pleasing understanding of why Kabbalah and Pnimis HaTorah is so important. And hopefully, again, this is based on a kuntras. I've got an introduction to Kabbalah, where I bring all of this in a very methodical way. Each midas tovas, bridging, context, each one's about 40 to 50 pages with all the makoros. It builds it out. And we've said before, in regards to education, the way the human being works is that we have to be able to experience some sort of conscious competency. If we hope to go higher, we have to have a basis of especially understanding in a healthy way. We have to be able to understand in a mature way. So that means we have to try and give. We have to try and, it has to on a certain level make sense. Because we will only learn to believe it in a healthier way when there's some connection. Because then a person gets into something and it doesn't work out their way and they become more skeptical. How many people do I know? It's sad, it's really, really sad. The Masar that I received was a Masara where, of course, Tamimus, but Tamimus doesn't mean, by the Heilige Ropshitzer, you have to mamish be a chacham to be a Tamim. But Tamimus is this nakuda of, or as we said, shiflus and anava, or shiflus. This nakuda is a very, very important nakuda. However, there has to be a basis for it. There has to be a basis. If a person doesn't have a basis for tamimus, the human mind, we weren't here. We're told Amelus, we're told Eov. So we have to use our mind, but we have to understand our mind is not the fullest picture. So I find you have like these schools, people become, rationalists, or people become, don't use your mind. And it's like one or the other. I hear sometimes, I mentioned last week, I'm in touch with this Yid who, he came from a very rationalistic family, and he ended up becoming Breslov, and all he did was just become like non-rational at all, which is foolish. And I said, that's what Rabbeinu wants, that's what Rabbi Nachman wants, which is daft to think such a thing. It's daft, it's like silly. So obviously what we're looking for is not the infinite and the finite. It's finding a system that allows us to speak to the mind, but to recognize it's part of a much bigger picture. And in our journeying within our individuality, our subjective experience, moving into and out into society, and our historical evolution, the next phase of our evolution If you go to the Emek HaMelech, it's called Razin de Razin, but it's found in a number of different places based on Hakol with Yaakov. When Yaakov left Shechem, he had everything. Hakol. This language is integration. This language is becoming a healthy, integrated individual. Now, over the exile, we became less and less integrated. And because we've become less and less integrated, number one, we have had more and more fights and we're more fractured. But when we can come to a place of integration, when we could speak a language of rationale, and when we could speak a language of what's beyond, and we can have these conversations in a healthy way with what we call subtlety, the art of subtlety. Am Yisrael is meant to be the nation of subtlety. Am Yisrael is meant to be the nation of holding paradox. Am Yisrael is meant to be the mature nation. And Kabbalah and proper limit HaTorah should lend to that, should take us there. Gemara and Kedushim, when a person learns Torah, it should take a person to a place of Daat. Obviously, you can be in a place of Daat to begin learning Torah, and that's why we ground ourselves. That's why we ground ourselves. Yes?
Maybe I totally missed the whole half an hour. I still don't not understanding the difference or what Kabbalah is adding to Musar. What I'm hearing, the main thing, there's a few things that I've heard, but one of them, it seems like the main point that I heard is this avodas middot, the importance of becoming
Stage one. But does it just end there?
With Kabbalah?
Because Kabbalah, the nakuda of Kabbalah is to receive. You're receiving something.
So before learning Kabbalah, you need to...
There needs to be an element of tikkun hamidah.
So what does it do with the actual learning of Kabbalah, with all the Yashar and Igul?
Because the more a person has a pagam in midos, the less that they can receive what's there to be received. So again, we're just bringing certain dimensions. Kabbalah as an introduction to Kabbalah, Tikkun HaMidos in Hishtavas. Kabbalah as bridging two completely opposite worlds in some sort of rational, holistic way without ditching the infinite, out ditching the finite. Kabbalah as in perspective. Kabbalah is in perspective, that the mind can't grasp godliness, but can something else grasp? The answer is yes, but that means you have to get your ego in check. You have to get your nefesh in check. You have to know where to let go and surrender, and you have to know where to hold on. So what we're sharing in the world of Kabbalah is this system of wisdom teachings that lend to a wholesomeness. A resilience as in nista, as we said. So we're just explaining a few different reasons why this world of Pnimis HaTorah and Kabbalah is so important, and for the paragraph that we're in now, why this Hagdama, I believe, is important. And we don't find it in other Chalakim of Torah. We don't. Other Chalakim of Torah, it's this, or it's that, or it's the other. If a person learns that Arizal properly, yes, it's abstract. Yes, it's just strange. I was by a certain Makubal. I don't know if you'd want me to say his name, so I'm not going to say it. So I remember when we started to learn Kabbalah, he said, Ken, ma'od muzal. Arizal, very strange books. Very, very strange books. But that's the Masorah, that's what we learn. But it lends to subtlety. It lends to context. It lends to a wholesomeness. Does that make it a little bit clearer?
Yes,
okay.
Thank you.
Beseder, Yafeh. Is there any other questions before we go into this chapter? Beseder. Do you want? If you want, there's in the box, on the table, in my office. Maybe bring a few out to replenish. It's a good sign. We're going, 200 have gone off the shelf now.
Nice.
So we now have to get another, Baruch Hashem. We've got, they've been sponsored, yeah. Okay, Chevra, so I'm going to shoot through what we discussed last week and read weiter. Okay, so the intellect cannot grasp godliness. I would like to change godliness. I don't know if we can. Can we change godliness to the Creator? I don't know. Can we do that? Does that work? I don't know. Godliness, the intellect can't grasp the Creator. I don't know. Okay. the Das state is always available to us and natural. So it's always available and natural to us. But it does require deliberate pursuit to experience it in our lives. Various meditations, contemplations, practices, breathing techniques, and mantras can help lead a person to this place. Even though even through conversation, a person could be guided to this state of being. So again, just a reminder, Reb Moshe Shapiro's preferred method of helping a person get to a state of das was from conversation. Why? Because all of the other breathing techniques and all of the coffees, we could become reliant on it. It's an inside-out paradigm, not an outside-in paradigm. It is a natural place for us to be, and it takes intention, but not exertion to arrive. Like children doing hard work and using the tools to seek the watch, trying vigorously to enter this state will more likely hinder than help you. This is a very important feature that is often overlooked. It's not difficult, it's different. It's neither mystical nor logical. Again, what I believe I was trying to share just for myself here is that we very much can fall into a black and white thinking. It's either or. It is mystical or it is logical. And what we're saying is, no, Kapshutai, there's an integration which then lends to something more wholesome. So here is an analogy that may help illustrate this point. If you imagine strong and high waves, they could be noisy, even frightening. However, when one dives down into the ocean 20 to 30 feet down, the water becomes more and more calm, more and more still. Our superficial mind can be full of noise, as it says, Rabbis Machshaves Belev Ish, Mishlei 1921. Yet, when we go inside letting go of the surface turbulence and meeting stillness and silence, Hashem guidance is constantly there, an infallible access to an ineffable access to tether us. Ve'etzas Hashem hi takum. Throughout history, philosophies, academics, and scientists have tried to define and describe this measure, this quiet place, and tried to describe and measure this quiet place, investigating such concepts as self and soul and consciousness and infinity. Using a wide variety of intellectual techniques, such as critical thinking, detachment, logic, and reasoning, they have uncovered various insights into the true essence of humanity. But the intellect cannot bring you to an experience of true self. So I just want to pick up on this by definition. The Nakuda of Das is completely still and silent. We can speak around it, we can't speak about it. It's still and silence. We're going to say something here that will just lend to a greater conversation, at least to get us to think about this, maybe to experience it. So, the intellect cannot bring you to an experience of true self. It can only help define what this essential self is not, to then explore of what it may be. A process called definition by negation. This is a useful tool, and we can use it to help approach a state of das by stripping away the layers of nefesh that obscure, see for example, reverse theology that the Mar Nevuchim brings and the Eitz Chaim brings. However, like tools of the intellect, it can only take you so far. Continuously revisiting the same unfathomable ideas with the intellect is like climbing an endless staircase. It may take you higher, but you will never reach the actual goal. In fact, you run the risk of convincing yourself that since you've climbed so high, surely you must be closer to infinity than others. Only when one is willing to stop climbing, to stand still, and to listen to the void surrounding the staircase, can one experience that which is beyond the grasp of the intellect. So that's, I believe, where we got up to last week. So we're speaking again, I don't want to lead anyone along. Like, it's very easy to create an equation. It's very, very easy to create an equation. The nakuda that we're sharing here it's odd. It is odd. And especially if we've never been educated into it. it's very different. It's very different because we've been led to believe, which there is a truth to it, that the mind can understand everything. The mind can grasp everything. Now you have to remember, number one, what is the mind? When we're speaking about what the mind is, we're using an English term. If you say that the mind is das, so there's a truth to it in Lashon HaKodesh, if you understand the definition of what it is. But if in English, the mind is very limited. And we can get hurt. We hurt ourselves. It decreases our quality of life. It decreases our experience. We end up thinking that I can understand everything and I can come to a place where I can control. Where what we can say is there is a truth to it, but there's something far more. There's something far, far more. Yes?
What's the difference between seichel and das?
It's a good question. What we typically share is the Maggid of Mezrich. Maggid of Mezrich and the Gra explain that Seichel asks questions. Das observes. So Seichel is a chaver to Machshava, as the Maggid of Mezrich writes, and it asks questions. And then from there, Machshava and Dimyon kick in. But that comes from a place of Das. Das is silence. Das is quiet and Das is silent. Das observes. As Eliyahu Navi says in Tikkun Zohar 17a, no thought can grasp you. The Balatani explains the word tfisa, grasp, is used specifically because one can normally grasp a concept intellectually. A subject can be within human intellect, surrounded and encompassed by it, much like a material object grasped in the hand. So this is, again, a very, very important nakuda. We are not ditching anything. We're not saying, oh, the intellect is dumb, it's stupid. The intellect hurts me. No, rationalism is dumb, rationalism is stupid. We're not saying that. And unfortunately, even the world, for example, of the Rambam got hijacked. Even the world of the Rambam got hijacked. Rambam's a rationalist. So if you really go into the Rambam and you recognize what the Rambam's trying to do, the Rambam is very, very respectful of what we are sharing here. The Rambam is very respectful of the non-cerebral. What I would share with the Rambam is, on one hand, I'm not going to go into the first point I wanted to share with the Rambam, but the second point is important. The Rambam was, if you look in Moreh Nevuchim, I understand and I respect fully Rabbi Nachman's approach. So don't go learn the Moreh Nevuchim if you're not going to learn the Moreh Nevuchim, but just to hear the idea that where the Rambam speaks in Moreh Nevuchim about prophecy and about different points that are beyond the rationale, beyond the normal workings of the mind, the Rambam's there speaking about it openly. So to say the Rambam is a rationalist is true. He wants us to use our minds and deliberately think. I will share the first point. It's just an interesting thought experiment. Whereas the Rambam wants us to think, he wrote a sefer that stops us from thinking. It's just an interesting nakuda.
Which sefer did he stop?
Yad Chazaka. He said the Rambam said learn Tanakh and learn the Yad Chazaka, and you don't need to learn anything else. Like, it's just an interesting nakuda. So you hear that interesting conversational piece? But then within Moreh Nevuchim, you see the Moreh Nevuchim speaks to the, whatever we want to call it, beyond the rational grasp, beyond the pseudo intellect. It's like, he goes into a mystical, not whatever language we want to use, he goes there and he's okay with it. And that's something very important to understand. And the reason why I'm bringing that is just so we can understand context. Again, context. Context is everything. However, one cannot grasp Hashem with the intellect. So this nakuda that people, no thought can grasp, no thought, no machshava. So is there something else, as we will come in to see, apart from machshava, that can grasp? Well, think about it. The brain is one element of the human experience. What about the rest of the human experience? What about all the other senses? What about all the other senses? Just leading into this conversation. One can only perceive godliness through filters, lenses of perception, and metaphors that Hashem created in order to allow us to approach an understanding of godliness. In this world, the closest one can come to experience godliness unfiltered happens when all the noise and reaching for metaphors and striving to grasp concepts can be quiet, and the silence of Das can create a space which godliness makes itself apparent. Just as listening to the quiet barn allowed the boy to pick up the faint ticking of the watch. So again, what we're speaking about here is that the machshava doesn't have a tfisa. But we're not just a brain on a stem. We're not just a brain on a stem. Yes?
So, what I'm understanding is that Hashem can only be grasped through das, which is observation, but can that then be turned into words and description? Meaning, I can see that you can't, a teacher, can't lead someone else to Hashem through words and description and conversation, because it can't be like, it needs to be experienced and not mentally understood. But once the experience happens, can that be described from a mental place?
Can I ask you to hold on? Hold your horses. Hold on. So just to articulate the question again, and if I'm saying something, just throw the stender at me. You know the script already. Once a person has had an experience, or can you use words to experience? Or can you use words to describe the experience? It's a good question. Well, let me just ask you simply, just your first response, yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, good. This relates to the Rebbe Nachman that we started off with a couple of weeks ago that we're going to mention here. So we can learn to transcend. We can learn, what's this saying?
Transcend.
Oh, to transcend. Well done, Yoshua. We can learn to transcend the range of intellectual and introspective capabilities in order to reach a quiet das. That these capabilities are constantly striving to reach. So what we are saying here, which is very important, it's true to say that the intellect, the mind, the seichel, the brain, the cognitive thinking is leading us to understand. But this is a conversation that we've been having since the beginning. It can only take you so far. But the question is, number one, do we even have the conversation of what comes after the limitation of the mind? Where I've been in yeshiva all my life, and I loved it, Baruch Hashem, I loved it, but it was only when I went to seek out certain individuals that these conversations could be had. So typically in schools, and typically depending on the teacher you have, you're not usually going to have conversations that will lead you beyond, at least just to entertain what we are sharing here, which then as well leads on to what it is to be an educator. And we spoke about this idea of unconscious competency and conscious competency. So transcendence is a key word. It means to go beyond. We go beyond the feelings of relativity and duality to come to experience pure unbounded oneness and infinite consciousness. So again, like I want to say this 1,000 times over. We are not rejecting the critical thinking. We're not rejecting the logical mind. What we are saying, it's an absolutely God-given tool. And we need to go beyond it. And we have the kalim within us to go beyond it.
Two different tools.
Yes. It's two different tools. And sometimes we get lost in one or the other. And what we're saying and what we have said all the way through, the Masorah that we're sharing here, the Masorah that I received from my teachers, is the most awkward of all Masorahs. Because it's not black and white. It's not black and white. What we are sharing here is not black and white, it's context-based. It's subtle. It's subtle. Time and time again, the Lashonos by Reb Moshe Shapiro, the Lashonos by Rabbi Singer, the Masorah from the words used by Reb Yitzchak Isaac Shapira, time and time again. Subtlety, context. It's not black and white. Like this is something important to think about. Remember as well, we have said in regards to the senses, because typically we're taking in information to what we have been led to believe. We have 5 senses. But actually, how many senses do we have? 10 senses. We have 10 senses. Yeah. Yeah. We have 10 senses. And the nakuda of the 10 senses are very important. The sense of time, the sense of self, the sense of balance. There's many more senses than the typical limited 5 senses that we've been led to believe. And actually, when we have the conversation about the 5 senses, you know already a lot of them. We have the sense of self, the sense of time, the sense of pain and pleasure. There's senses that we are experiencing the world with. These are the tools within the bodysuit that we have, that we're taking in data, we're taking in information. And that becomes part of our experiencing what as well can become a conversation of the experience of godliness. And that's something very, very, very important. I just want to add here, we've mentioned this before, and this is, again, just a fundamental. Please understand, I'm just trying to share principles with you. I'm trying to share principles. Don't get like, oh, I didn't get it, and now I'm going to miss out. No, I'm just sharing principles. I'm sharing principles. Whatever you get, you get. It's like there's such a subjective journey here for you to hold. I'm just sharing principles. I'm talking. I have a big mouth. It's like you guys turned up. You turned up. I didn't ask you to come. You turned up. So I've got a big mouth, so I'm talking. But I'm speaking in terms of principles. Don't get lost. Don't make completely linear and black and white what I'm saying, because it's not. We're trying to share the art of subtlety. We're trying to come back to an Am Yisrael that's beyond the noise that we may fall into. The Am Yisrael of subtlety. The Am Yisrael of maturity. The Am Yisrael of hyper-focusing onto our Avodah to such an extent that anything that's happening around us is less important than the Avodah. The Avodah is pulling us along. The Abrahamic vision, which we label in English caring, sharing, supporting and encouraging with good firm boundaries, that's our Avodah. Torah and mitzvahs is our Avodah. And it really doesn't matter what's going on around us.
Or whether we think or not.
Or whether we think or not. Gewaldig, thank you. So the nakuda is that we take into consideration what's going on around us if it fits into a halachic model, our halachic way of being. Otherwise, we just go back. Okay, I stop, I notice this is going on now. What's the context of it? Nah, okay, push it to the side, back. Caring, sharing, supporting, encouraging with good firm boundaries. That's it. It's like, so, Torah mitzvahs, learning, performing mitzvahs, Torah, avoid gimelos chasadim. It really isn't complicated. And we sometimes get lost, and then we just come back to this nakuda of recognizing, I've got my Ikka Avodah. We spoke about how there is divine encounter and divine experience. Divine experience is to do with the das tachton chitzoni, that I'm in a space, there's time, and I'm constantly meeting Hashem, I'm constantly meeting Elokus. And then you've got divine experience, which is your own experience when maybe your eyes are closed, when you're singing. That's your own subjective personal experience. And what we're trying to do is to produce through conversation a way of understanding to start to bridge these worlds, that we can live more wholesomely, more fully. It's definitely an avodah, and it's bigger than just the brain. We take in all this information and data through a whole human experience. And the more kadosh and tahor we are in our body, the more we work on taras hamachshava, purifying our thinking, the better the lens is, the cleaner the lens is. So we know, for example, and I try to communicate this, I teach in a couple of yeshivas, and I try to communicate this time and time again. And Baruch Hashem, the integrity needs to be there, the integrity. So in typically, I'm not sure how it came around, but in the more modern world, it happens as well in the more world that's, so to speak, working on Kedusha and Tahara. And I want to be very careful with what I say here. So just I'm fumbling around words a little bit as I say this. But in the yeshivas I work in, which are typically more modern Orthodox yeshivas, there's this, it's normal to watch movies. It's normal to listen to Geisha music. And you look at the research, again, I'm not saying that doesn't happen in the more yeshivas that work on Kedusha and Tahara. I'm not saying that. I'm saying typically there's a reshus. It's like, I work in other yeshivas which would be called more Haredi, so they hide it a little bit. So I think there's a goodness, like they chap, but they may not chap. Why? Which is a shame. But the Nakuda, like I tell the guys where I teach, where I share, I don't really teach, I share, I entertain. I tell them, you have to understand that your mind is the doorway to your perception. So when people are coloring their perception with Geisha junky music, which like 90%, if I'm being really, really kind, but 90% of the music there is junk as anything. And I'm a musician. Like I play music. I sometimes listen with them, like, what are you listening to? Let me hear. So they put on the clean stuff that I can listen to, but it's horrific. Some of the stuff that they're listening to is horrific, and this is normal in their eyes. What they're watching is normal in their eyes. But you look, forget Judaism and Torah, you look from the mental health, psychological perspective of what it creates as imagery of what should be normal or not normal, it's sick. Absolutely sick. And then we are like surprised there's mental health issues, and we're surprised there's a lack of connection to the divine. Now, as well, within the world of learning, I think there's a big challenge as well, because educators are not necessarily fully engaged in the generational language of what's going on in the audience's brain. So, for example, it was the merit of the Biala Rebbe Shlita, Zichron Livracha. The Biala Rebbe pushed me to learn generational language. So you have baby boomers and millennials and Gen Z and so on and so forth. Each generation, based on society, based on the cultures, based on technology, have their own language. And it's very important to recognize as an educator, like if you're going to get up, I work very, very hard on this. First of all, educators have sell-by dates. It's like pshutai, sell-by dates. Sell-by date, just as a food.
Sell by.
Sell-by date, yeah. So there's a sell-by date. An educator has to be able to get up and seriously ask themselves, am I damaging right now as I get up and I share? That's one of the fundamental questions that I ask. I'm actually speaking at an organization next week, and it's about education and how to improve education. And this is, I've got a book. It's notes from Be'erach 2004, 2005, and I've stopped I'm not writing as much as I once did. I stopped writing 2012 in this particular genre of writings, and it's all to do with education. And I've got like lists of questions to ask yourself, and lists of questions or lists of concepts to be aware of after speaking to the Biala Rebbe, or speaking to Rev Meir Belsky, or the Sasva Rebbe, or the Radamishla Reb Chuna Halpern. I went and I sat with them. What does it mean to be a mashpia? What does it mean to be an educator? By the way, that question didn't even arise at the beginning. It was Reb Chuna Halpern that said, Reb Chuna Halpern really Reb Chuna Halpern in London, he pushed me, says, give a chabura, teach, give a chabura, you've got the clarity when you speak, you take it seriously, you care, teach, you'll be good. So he's the one that pushed me, and it was only after I met Rabbi Singer, the actual question, 2004, whenever it was, question came into being, like, oh, what does it mean to be a mashpia? What does it mean to be getting up and transmitting information? What does that actually mean? And then it started me on questions to tzaddikim and gedolei Torah, one after the other. Now, what does it mean to be a mashpia? And that would be my question. What does it look like? And what I would always try to do is, when I would go to the tzaddikim, it wouldn't be like, what it would be like is, what are you doing? How are you doing that? So when the Biala Rebbe would hold a piece of paper with my name on, and he would close his eye and said, Rebbe, what are you doing? What are you doing now? Or Rav Morgenstern, what are you doing? Like, how are you doing that? Because for me, one thing I did learn was conscious competency. I recognized this is what the tzaddikim are doing. So if the tzaddikim are doing this and people are running, they're trying to get something out. They're trying to chap something. And I realized it was to do what they're doing. So how do you do that? Ask them what they're doing. Kapshutai. And I used to ask Reb Moshe, when Reb Moshe Shapira is teaching, what's going on inside? And he was brilliant. Reb Moshe was like unbelievable. Unbelievable. When Rav Belsky, who wrote the Citadel and Tower, when he was educating, I'd ask him, I said, Rebbe, what's going on inside of you as you teach? And words would come out and I would write. So this nakuda of conscious competency, this nakuda of recognizing we're not just brains on a stem. We're not just brains on a stem. There's something very, very deep going on in living if we give it half the chance. Another nakuda just before we carry on here, is that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu is communicating to us, we get lost a little bit. Unless guided into it, we get lost a little bit, where it's a metzias of, when I'm looking at you, I can see you, I can smell, I can touch, I can hear you. Like there's a reality when we're communicating where we are using the senses. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu is talking to us, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu is communicating to us, we have all of these other senses that are being used as well. So, lemashal, you're walking down the street and it's a warm day. Right now, for example, it's so nice outside. So typically when I would do my exercise, it would be really early in the morning to do my exercise because it was much cooler. Right now I can get away with changing around my seder a little bit and I do my exercise a bit later because the weather's so amazing. But that's a communication. You walk outside, it's like, like that's HaKadosh Baruch Hu speaking to you. That's divine encounter and a divine experience. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, there's a revelation that's going on here. But how conscious are you in order to be in the presence of the Creator? We're always in the presence of the Creator, given half the chance. But it has to be more than just cerebral. It has to be more than just cerebral. We can't grasp it just with our minds. So, yes?
I would say it's almost easier with Hashem, because like you just said, with a person, I can see you, I can smell you, I can touch you, and we tend to rely on those functions of senses in order to know another person, but there really is another way to know a person. I can sense your presence.
Correct.
And a lot of times we don't go past the 5 things that we know to know another person. But with Hashem, the only way to really know him is to sense his presence.
Yes.
But I feel like in Bein Adam L'Chavero also, that ability to sense another person's presence is overshadowed by the ability to see them from physical.
Correct. There was a kung fu master who he was nifta maybe 20-something years ago. He lived in Hong Kong when I was training. I must have been about 15. I remember they brought him in, and he was close to 100 years old. And I can't remember what happened where, but he was blinded. He was like kidnapped and blinded by whatever was going on in that area at that point in time. And I remember I said to him, I said, Master, like you were blinded. What happened? And he said, it was the grace of God. And I said, what does that mean? It was as they took a knife and they used a knife to blind him. As they did that, I was just smiling and so happy. He mamish had a darga of like hishtavas, he was trained. And I said, why? He says, because as I trained from a little child, it always bothered me. I was completely and utterly reliant on my senses. And now I had to shift into training and study without my eyes. It was the biggest blessing. I said, did you become worse at what you are attempting to be a wholesome human being and training physically and mentally? Did you become worse? And he goes, no, that's when I became much, much better. It's like it's an odd reality, but like you said, once we actually start speaking about it, we become very heavily reliant on our senses, which is very much to do with the intellect. Yes?
So just to, I guess we'll say, push back a little bit on one of the things Rav mentioned. And on the one hand, things are very misudar, Torah mitzvos, we have what they were supposed to do. But there is also a constant communication that is happening, and there's a subjective experience with how we are meant to relate to that. So just as an example, the Rav made me think of it just now. This week, there happened to be this massive storm in Beit Shemesh, Ramat Beit Shemesh, and it turns out that only in Ramat Beit Shemesh, this storm was so significant. The rest of the country didn't really feel it. So based on what the Rebbe was just saying, that seemingly would represent something unique that Hashem is communicating to us, but we don't necessarily know exactly what that is.
Correct, and we're not going to, though. So what's the answer? You're right. What's the answer? What's the pushback and what's the answer? First of all, what's the pushback and what's the answer?
So the pushback is that the human experience is not always going to be black and white. There seems to be a lot of
correct. Good. Yes.
And the answer is, I guess, I'm not sure what the answer is.
But what's the pushback? You said you.
No,
I like the pushback.
No, because the Rav referenced how a lot of things are not necessarily so difficult in terms of how we're meant to live, which is
so that's the interpretation of it is difficult.
Right, because
yes.
Right. The overall experience. That's what always, because the Rav has referenced this many times. It's not that the
yes, you're right.
Complicated, but humans, we make it all very complicated. Yeah. Sometimes to our detriment. Sometimes we can elevate, but that process, Hashem clearly wants us to go through that struggle, so to speak, because that's how we're made.
Yes. So the interpretation of it is far more delicate. Yes, I agree with you.
And so that, and I think this is where it becomes even more, I guess, a pushback, because we don't necessarily know how to balance. Because some people could say, something crazy just happened, I don't know how to interpret it, and I'm stuck.
I hear that.
So it's just, so this is not me really pushing back as much as it's also just, I guess, referencing my own challenge.
Just to go back into guilt, to help yourself decode what the message is.
That's fine. And of course, and we're created, because then that creates doubt, and then with it,
So that's the nakuda of having. That's the subtlety. That's the maturity level that we are wanting to engage in. It's you're 1,000% right. That is the avodah. That's the avodah. It's to work on harnessing some sort of balance and integrity. Not easy. Human experience is darn difficult and icky at times. Architecture of the soul is straightforward. And that's part of the maturity that we're speaking to. It's part of the conscious competency we're speaking to. So, thank you. So, to get into this state is not just contemplation. And it's not just focusing all concentration. So it's not just I'm going to think now really hard. It's a fundamental shift in our perception and remembering. Remember, we spoke about this. Amalek wants us to forget. Daat is remembering. Consciousness is remembering. Just to come back, become embodied, become present. Das tachton pnimi and chitzoni. That already creates an alignment. That's remembering. The truth is, once we start having these conversations, it's rather natural to come to this transcendent place. It doesn't take time. Thank you. It does take time, and it does take some effort. It's not difficult, it is different. Maybe this is what Rabbi Nachman is speaking about in Sichas Haran Aleph. For I know that the Creator, that God is great, and God is above all others, based on Tehillim. These are King David's words. I know, I alone, for the vision of God's greatness cannot be shared. You may have a vision, and even with yourself, you cannot share it. So this, again, is das and this nakuda of nefesh, this alignment process. look, it can be very painful. There's an existential loneliness that as human beings we experience, that we do everything we can to run away from. But the Matthias is, it's there. There's an existential loneliness that we are in. This is, if you remember, we spoke about the glorious Tzaddik, Rav Soloveitchik, halachic mind and lonely man of faith, ish devekus, lonely man of faith, ish devekus. This nakuda is a very, very difficult. It's very, very difficult because no one wants to feel an existential loneliness. Well, if we learn to recognize that it's just a vessel to connect to something higher, it becomes less daunting. But it's okay as well to feel this existential loneliness. It's part of who and what we are. And the question is, can we lean into it and just allow it to be at times? Can we fill it with devekus? Or are we constantly trying to cover it up? You know, it's interesting because there's a whole science of existentialism. And typically existentialism leads to what? Do what you want because you're going to die anyway. Like so, you know, I mentioned I've got this series, if I met Nietzsche, if I met Kant, if I met whatever it may be, what would I share with them? And the nakuda is, we as Jews are existentialists. We recognize as, you know, like, everything is meaningless. We are here to bring meaning to it. We're here to make things as meaningful as possible. That's part of our avodah as members of Bnei Israel. It's more important how we are looking at something than what we are looking at. The meaning of life is a far lesser question than how can I make life more meaningful? That's the real question. How can I make life more meaningful? So the Rabbi Nachman speaking a very deep truth here. Even with ourselves, I can have an experience, as Rabbi Nachman says, of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the next day I forget it. It's the same way. I have a dream and I wake up and I remember the dream for a moment and then it dissipates, it goes. And that's okay. Again, that's a level of maturity that we want to be living with. The paradox is that the moment I think, the moment I open my mouth to speak, I'm not myself. I'm representing myself in thoughts and speech. I am behind that thought. The very fact that my thought can be contained in imagery, sound, or language disqualifies the thoughts from the essential part of self, which is infinite and still. Ramchal in Derech Chochmah, where he writes that Tachlis, the greatest praise to the Rabbeinu Shalom is silence and stillness. But Chazal told us to daven. Chazal told us to open up our mouth. Only in the moment that I stop thinking or speak and even quiet my mind, I reconnect to essence. This is the true self, only experienced when the mind and body are still and silent.
Bizarre design.
The whole nakuda right now is that what we are attempting to do is experience this place and then stumble to mitlabesh, to clothe the experience and share it. This is the part that for your sister she should hear. But this nakuda is that we want to use language. We want to be able to become consciously competent, to have the ability, even though it's, as we've just said, the paradox is the moment I think, the moment I open up my mouth to speak, I am not myself. I'm not representing myself. I am representing myself in thoughts and speech. I'm behind that thought. The very fact that my thoughts can be contained in imagery, sound, or language disqualifies the thought of being the essential part of self, which is infinite and still. Only in the moment I can stop thinking or speaking or even quieten my mind, I reconnect. I'm reconnected to essence. So this nakuda is a very, very important nakuda. Very, very, very important nakuda. And it's good for us. It's odd, but it is good for us. Yes?
So what I'm hearing is that this state of being that we're trying to get to, all the things that we're doing to try to get to it, we can't do it can't do this. You just have to be this. This is not something that can be done.
We can lead ourselves. We can lead ourselves. We can lead ourselves to a certain point.
To a certain point.
Yes, and that's what we're trying to establish here. We're trying to establish a conscious competency. We're trying to establish through speaking, through learning, through asking questions. Number one, that there is a system. Number two, how the system works. Number three, trying to give through life experiences, through words, and through speaking, which is what takes us away from it, but it's inevitable that's what can lead us towards it.
So our metaphor of the staircase, the infinite staircase, we should climb. We should climb the staircase.
1,000%. 1,000%.
But at a certain point, we have to recognize that continuing to climb the staircase is not really getting us closer to infinity. The only thing that we could do is step off the staircase and be in the void.
So
Now, if you don't climb the staircase, or you only climb 4 steps, and you step off the staircase and you're in the void, maybe you'll recognize it, but you don't really have as much time to not grasp, but to experience it before you hit the bottom. Whereas if you climb higher, you're potentially giving yourself more time, more space in which to experience the void. But if you keep climbing higher and you never step off the staircase, you're not actually...
correct. So this is the paradox. This is the paradox that we're dealing with.
Yeah.
The more knowledge I have, the more language I have, the better command, the more sophistication I have, which is, so to speak, the prison that can hold me down, is the same vehicle that can take me to the place of becoming free.
So how does one know if they're imprisoning themselves or liberating themselves?
Good luck.
Oh.
Because typically our life is experienced differently. The metrics, and we've said this before, there's certain metrics to do with spirituality. When we speak about ruchnius can be spirituality, but another term we can use in English to describe ruchnius is a spiritual vibration. So from a spiritual vibrational frequency, there's lower spiritual vibrational frequencies, which are heavier middot. Then you have a mid-range of middot, and then you have higher spiritual vibrational frequency. Higher vibrational frequency. So for example, low is anger and lust, etc., etc. Mid is tolerance and silence. And the highest is love, peace, and unity. So we have markers of vibrational growth. Another nukuda of knowing how you are doing is, as you meet a situation, number one, how do you relate and react to it? So you can assess, I'm now going to say that I've improved, because when I last time met this situation, it really bent me out of shape. And it bent me out of shape, and my recovery was a number of months. But now, it bent me out of shape, and instead of a couple of months, my ability to come back to centering, to das, was only 1 or 2 days. Like, that's amazing. And then, more than that, the more you work on yourself, then the metric is, I met this situation and I was okay with it. I stayed calm, I was okay with it. So there's spiritual markers, or there's markers, practical, rational markers to our spiritual growth. And then eventually when a person can actually meet a situation and they're not bent out of shape, and they can actually say, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I didn't like that, but thank you. Like, I've learned so much from it. So what in fact we can create and describe in conscious competency are metrics that speak around this place that can't be spoken about. So again, the paradox is the tools that can distance us are the same tools that can bring us closer to. Very Ropshitz. Yes, very Ishbitz, very Ropshitz.
Thank you, that's very clear and also very frustrating and disappointing.
But that's your nefesh speaking, that's not you. Tell her. Oh, you as well?
My nefesh is very frustrated
Yes.
and disappointed. My neshama is dancing around outside. I'm hearing from the Rav that the way that I can know if I am imprisoning or limiting or liberating myself is by the outcome.
Is it outcome?
The outcome, the experiential outcome.
Well, that's one side of it. The other side is I feel from day to day more calm, clearer of mind. I'm more loving. I'm more
but
compassionate.
That's the experiential outcome. That's what I mean by that the experience feels different, that I have more resilience. I'm looking for...
And I'm more quiet inside. I'm more quiet.
Okay, so I think I'm looking for recognizable characteristics that I can identify as the experience is happening to me, rather than at the end of the experience when I'm like, oh, I was calmer, I was more resilient.
Maybe the point just to talk to here, when a person enters an experience, the more they are in a state of das, the more they are aware of the das tachton chitzoni as well as the das tachton pnimi.
Separation of them?
Is that already speaking to what you're... So a person enters a situation, and as they enter, they are fully aware of what's going on. And more than that, the more we work on our middot, the nefesh is going to remind us. The nefesh will, because I'm now present, and this is an akudah that we were speaking to some time ago with Ruach HaKodesh. So what is Ruach HaKodesh and why is it beneficial? So one definition of Ruach HaKodesh is insight. It's insight. And we brought the Gra and several other different definitions from the tzaddikim. It's insight. And why is that helpful is because in the present moment it allows me to know what to do in a more healthy, global, precise way.
So when the Rav is more aware, I think maybe what the Rav is trying to communicate is that I see the elements of my experience as opposed to being overwhelmed by
Correct.
one specific element or three or
Correct.
four specific elements that have blocked out everything
Yes,
else.
yes. So I'm not overwhelmed.
It's not a
Part of being...
Being aware of an experience is not, I'm not thinking about, oh, I'm aware of the experience.
Correct.
It's not words in your head.
It's not words in our head. There's a silent awareness of the experience, and the more I can cultivate that, by definition, I can hold in a more expanded way parts. I can hold all the parts. So it may be right now I can hold the parts in this way, but then there's an expansion where I can hold the experience in a very, very healthy way, with maturity, with compassion, with resilience, with boundaries, etc., etc. Does that talk to what you
I think so.
But this is a very important conversation, because again, what we want is to bring around these teachings that we can become that merkava and live it. So thank you for bringing this up. Thank you for bringing this up. More to talk about. Beseder Tov, we're going to stop here for today. So we will start next week, page 20. It is important. We'll do a chazar and then it is important to experience. And I just want for you right now just to take a moment, and whatever you've heard before, there's divine experience and there's a divine encounter. What did you hear? What did you hear today? What works with you? And as well to recognize as we walk out to improve your life, to improve the lives of others, because you can. It's nice to be nice, and it's horrible to be horrible. And Be'ezras Hashem, just take a moment afterwards, we'll put the machine off, and then people will stop and they'll talk and they'll share, and then we'll ask some questions afterwards. So Be'ezras Hashem, Chevra, online, you should all have bracha, mazel and hatzlacha. I love you, I respect you, and I'm always excited to hear from you. L'chaim tovim u'l'shalom, bracha v'hatzlacha, and the Chevra here as well.